Okay, so thank you very much for coming along. First of all, I'd like sorry because the speech should have been delivered by a colleague of mine that has a flu. Don't be scared, because we are not in physical contact with him. He is working on the field, so I have to deliver the speech. I've had a couple of days to prepare what he has prepared, and a part that I feel a little bit more comfortable with. He's a specialist at the OT part, and I have a point of view from the security point of view, but thank God we have Sacristán here, who knows about both worlds, and I'm in the shadows, so to speak. So let's start with the speech. One question, is there anybody here that belongs to a company considered as a critical infrastructure? Okay, was it a joke? No, I mean, I don't know if anybody has received any notification taking into account that they're a critical infrastructure, any special notification about how they have to behave with this topic of coronavirus. Because if you haven't received it, it doesn't seem that it is so critical, right? So let's move on. So why virtualizing in OT? So this can be answered by itself. We have some restrictions that we'll see later on. And one of the main advantages that we have is energy. That is not cheap, and this could be important. Another advantage would be space. There are many facilities on the field where we don't have plenty of space, and it is not, well, this is something important. And another important thing is physical security. As we have our devices at a more compact space, it's easier for us to put them in cupboards and to see who accesses these infrastructures. We need to take into account the intrinsic characteristics of OT networks that unlike other networks, one of their parameters is the availability, unlike IT where it is confidentiality. But on the other hand, a problem in industrial systems can cause them can be harmful for people or for the environment, so we should always take this into account. So physical security of these components is key. We have operational flexibility. In fact, a virtualized environment gives you flexibility that is not given by a physical environment. And availability and trustability. Something that I forgot. In terms of operating flexibility, a very interesting part of virtualization in OT is the lab creation in order to experience in a virtualized environment rather than developing and deploying physical machines all over the place. So aside from all these advantages, we have these other advantages that would be the typical ones about virtualization. I would like to point out a very important one. That is this one: recovery in front of disasters. Because according to an analysis that we are conducting about the different stakeholders that are attacking the OT networks, well, traditionally, the industrial networks have been attacked by attackers that are sponsored by governments in the context of a cyber Cold War that we're living. You only have to remember Stuxnet. It was a case where after some time we've discovered that there was a spy, a former Dutch spy was paid by a joint venture between the US and Israel, so that in the infrastructures of a manufacturer that was deploying in Iran, they had to release that bug. Another important case are the the problems that there were in Ukraine, and this was because of Russia. So they are using ransomware. So the recovery in front of a disaster, well, it's much easier to recover from damage to an equipment that has been encoded rather than if the devices are physically distributed all over the place. And recovery would be much more difficult. I don't know if you want to add anything. Yeah, for example, we have when we have a Windows XP in some industries, for example in automotive industry, and we have a super old device that is doing a critical task that can't be modified because the software, well, you can't put the software into a new machine, it's not compatible, it works at 32 bits, and you have to do something to change this machine because it's the last one you have, and you have no other way to have a useful life cycle. So here the virtualization is really useful because we can use both 32 and 64 bits machines and any other that is necessary. So virtualization in this OT part is important. Apart from this, it could also give us a virtual patching where we could protect this legacy machine before any vulnerabilities or attacks that are absolutely habitual. I would like to speak about the security infrastructure. I would like to speak about the space. For example, imagine that we have an oil company. We have a well 1,000 kilometers away from here, and we have a very small booth, and there we need to have basic architecture in terms of corporate network, VPN access, firewall, switches, and if we put an isolated network at DMZ, if we want to put some background machines for the operation, if we want to have a sys protection device. I mean, all these things, if we split it up, we are speaking about a lot of machines and servers. But in 3 or 4 racks with a virtualized architecture, we can use all this and we would have high availability. So what are our virtualization scenarios? We're going to speak a little bit about the scenarios that we've worked with. And for this, we're going to show, first of all, this typical architecture, maybe not that much if we have the bad luck that we are not at an environment that is mature enough. What we can see there are the different levels of the scheme. ESA, we can see the ESA model, where we have a part that it would be this, that would be an IT part. Here we have the internet, the IT DMZ, the corporate network, and here we move to an area where we should have the devices that provide service to the industrial network separated by firewalls, so that different places have their own firewall, or even at the same site we have segmentation by firewalls here or there. So in the end, what we have is we have a segment north-south segmentation and east-west segmentation. There are people that think that this architecture is obsolete. Why? Because of the IT-OT convergence. There are people that think that separating these environments in this way is a little bit artificial because the OT world will be increasingly interconnected with IT. This is true, but according to our point of view, this segmentation makes all the sense because of what we've said before. The industrial network part has some characteristics that the IT part doesn't have. So from the logic point of view, it has some features that the other doesn't, and it should be segmented. In fact, these firewalls that separate these networks, well, these ones here, have to be firewalls that understand about OT protocols and that they don't let anybody jump here without passing through a jumping machine here, and between these areas, or rather between these ones, there shouldn't be specific traffic or industrial networks, and here there should be some very particular cases. But generally speaking, any OT network traffic should go from here to here. The industrial traffic should be here. This is the field area. This is where the actuators would be. And where can we virtualize? The easier area to virtualize would be this one. The lower we are here, the easier it is that the manufacturer is using his or her ecosystem. So this is, well, this is a great simplification because, well, we should draw more boxes here, but not to overwhelm you with a very accurate or thorough drawing. We've done this way. We have had projects where we have virtualized these manufacturers in these environments. Here what you can see, in the case of Honeywell, for example, if you want to explain it a little bit. Yep. Just to simplify the drawing, we have put a level 3, and now we are splitting it in different levels. This level 3, if we follow the network architecture, doesn't fit exactly with what we are speaking about at a DMZ level. What happens? We have a 3.5 level. This is where we will have our initial DMZ, where we will give access to the managers that belong to this industrial system. So both Honeywell like Siemens, Yoko, Schneider, you name it, will have access to this DMZ network. This network will be shared for all the sites or all the groups that will be below this level. So below this level, we will have level 3.2 and 3.1 that we'll see in a bit. And that would be under the firewalls. It depends on the manufacturer. From Honeywell, 3.5 means DMZ, 3.2 is a shared network, and beyond firewalls, below firewalls, specifically at the site entry, these are different machines that will be shared for all the solutions that you will have on the field. So, on this DMZ, what we will have is a jumping equipment. We have a device. It's a device that manages the users. It encodes through the means 9PN. We have antivirus. We have a change control. We have the monitoring of what is being done. So we have a machine that is saved that won't give an VPN, and we can see that there's monitoring when we have a log, and it allows us to It allows us that all the files that we can send that way can be previously visualized and analyzed. So this is a jumping server device, but we have other machines. And what is usually introduced into a DMZ before getting into an industrial system? Well, we have the CM collector. Well, it's usually put in here. What is a CM collector? Well, all the machines are creating some events, are creating some logs. So from the part of switches or firewalls or Windows events. So this has to go to a machine in every single site. What happens? If we put it in DMZ, we would open many ports so that this information gets to DMZ. So as the idea is to close all the communications possible, the ideal thing would be to put a capturer of the CM, just a collector where all the logs and all these events will be sent from the industrial systems upwards as a data sending. I mean, you only have one communication address, and this CM will send data to the corporate part where they will have an operation center with a team that has to perform the audit. What else do we have? We have PHP Shadow. We are speaking about historical data. Okay, so from Honeywell, it is a jump device. It's a device that in order to fulfill the regulations, we can't skip. I mean, we can jump from the industrial system from the industrial system to the corporate network, and the other way around. We need to go network by network. So we would go to DMZ, and after that we would go to the corporate network. As we can't connect directly the industrial system with the corporate network, we need to include another jumping device for our historical record. In our historical record, we can have communications not only in terms of Honeywell, but also with other manufacturers. And we do not only use TCP/IP, it's always used TCP/IP, I mean, but not only an IP frame as such. We can use OTC, or we can use different communication protocols, industrial communication protocols. So the firewalls, as Fran was saying, well, these firewalls that separate DMZ network from the industrial part need to know this industrial protocol, because otherwise we would be sending data that are encapsulated in our TCP/IP frame, and it happens that our firewall lets them in because it doesn't know what there is. So you're passing 1 and 0s, and the firewall can't recognize what is going through the network. So it is important that these firewalls that are between the DMZ layers and the industrial parts have a DPI, and this DPI is necessary according to the industrial protocols that are going through the network. Not all, but at least the ones that we are using. So if we have other managers, if we have an NTP server, well, the ideal place to connect an ATP at time protocol would be the DMZ. Why? Because imagine that we have several sites, we have different manufacturers. So what does NTP contribute at DMZ and not below? Well, it generates this time protocol for the whole network. So it's a more comfortable way, and knowing the price that an NTP server has because of the 4G and so on and so forth. So it is the optimal situation to put the device. So all the manufacturers work more or less the same. We are speaking about Yoko, Foxborough, and Schneider with a different servers. So what happens? We have stuck to the different architectures that we've worked with. So not all of them have the DMZ for the same things. You can find different variations, and if you're used to seeing industrial systems, you'll see that manufacturers do not abide by architecture. They say, no, it's better to me to have this DMZ antivirus, and from there on I can control and I can manage things better. Or maybe, well, if you have the same manufacturer, maybe you can do it, but you have different manufacturers, it could be an issue. So let's move on. Yes? Well, another environment where we can virtualize, as I've said before, the more difficult would be here with the level 3.2, that would be a mix between 3 and 2. Some of the elements that we can virtualize can be seen there. Well, Honeywell, Yokogawa, or Yoko, as you usually call it, because it's quite easier to pronounce, or Foxborough. So exactly the same happens. We have the same elements. I don't know if you want to explain more things about Honeywell. Yeah, let me tell you what is an interesting point in implementing a service network, common service network, in terms of control. If we have several sites, for example, imagine that every site is 1 kilometer away from each other, or some 100 meters. So what happens? Maybe our machines can connect. Maybe we have to include some domain controllers. Maybe we have to include many machines. And in fact, well, there could be elements at this part of the network that are including the jungle some kilometers away. So as we have this problem, it is important to create this common service network. So what happens? Here we have our elementary services that we need, that need to work for our site and for different manufacturers. And for example, there we can find the sending out of Honeywell. This is our center of operations, so to speak, the one that will provide us with the Omni controller, the one that will provide us with the EPO in order to manage the antivirus. We will find the patching of Windows, and we'll find different machines just included in this server. We will find the backup and restore. That's important, because if we need to include some of these elements distributed along the network, can be difficult, but if we have just one, it's much easier to readdress it. So what are the problems can we find if we have several sites and one of them is connected through 4G, or the connection is a satellite connection? Maybe the backup can give us some issues because maybe the bandwidth is very small and we have to control the backups so that it only works during the night, or not to exceed the bandwidth when developing this upload of data. So the fact of having a backup here that is usually closer to the industrial part, and sometimes you can match this bandwidth and you can improve the data flow quality. the track record and the event collector should be at this common area. Why? Because here you can have some open ports. This is a safe area. We are speaking about the safest area of the network. Here we can open all the ports you want and to inject all the traffic you want to these event collectors or to the historical record so that we can upload it to the DMZ. The good thing of having all these services in a shared all the shared services is that you only need one channel app. So from one IP to another IP you can use a tunnel. So in the devices they will go through different machines. I would only like to say, for the ones that are not familiar with that, you see that we have the antivirus there. Maybe you don't know this, but sometimes the manufacturer comes and imposes its own antivirus. It doesn't matter the antivirus you have and how good or bad you have it set. The manufacturer will come along and they will impose their own antivirus. Just this remark. And we can virtualize these elements too within the SCADA network. Now we move to much more specific elements about, well, control network. If you want to say something about it. Yeah, as regards the control network, we've said that we've moved from the 3.2 and 3.1, that is the shared area, we moved to the industrial system to what is generating money. We have different devices here. For example, from Honeywell, we have CF9, that is our firewall. All our communications that Honeywell has in the industrial system always go through a firewall. In this case, it would go through DMZ, or if it is through our safety manager, well, it also includes the firewall within this team, the device, sorry. We'll have the C300, all the PLCs that will be the ones that will have the ins and outs, that are the ones that are working with level 1, that are controllers, pumps, and so on and so forth. So, just for you to know. So, is it possible to virtualize this? Normally speaking, no, because protocols are sometimes designed by the industrial part, and the response time has to be very, very fast. More than 2 milliseconds is too much, so they have to be very accurate. And in this area is where the manufacturers are a little bit more skeptical as regards virtualization. We can't virtualize level 3. We can virtualize DMZ. Why? Because in the end they are servers. We are speaking about the same thing. The fact of virtualizing a PLC, we are speaking about important things. So why? Because industrial systems with unique protocols for this and with a unique hardware, well, it's much more difficult. It's much more difficult, the fact of virtualizing here. Where are we virtualizing this environment? In labs. The labs are the ideal place where we can virtualize all these systems. Why? Because these systems have a humongous price. So if we have virtual machines and with some interface cards, network cards, that's perfect. In order to recreate the situation that we have at the factory, to conduct updates and changes, to develop protocols, to test them, to test new devices, or to test secure devices. Yes, for example. So the lab where we are virtualizing this part, well, it's a lab, so to speak, but we won't do it on the field. Well, it will take some years to do it on the field. So we move to the challenges in terms of security. Regarding the virtualization, well, first of all, we're going to virtualize, since we are speaking about a very particular virtualization that would be the virtual machines virtualization through a EMware. In this case, we need to guarantee that this virtualization environment is specially secured, because if somebody is able to take control, can damage our system a lot. So the first recommendation is that the virtualization environment has to be specially secured, either following the SACE guides for these environments or with other protocol. So we should scan the vulnerabilities. This system should be updated before than any other system, because this is the one that has a drawer with all the keys, if you understand the metaphor. Imagine that this system is compromised, so it could knock down some critical processes. Next part would be the one of implementing all the virtualized equipments. the point of having a virtualized environment lets us work with templates, because if you have tried to work with a hardening guide, you need to use specific tools, because it seems that the ones that have made these guides are some paranoid psychopaths. So it's very difficult to follow the guide, and after following the guide, you need to guarantee that everything works perfectly. We'll see that Honeywell has a tool, and the next question would be, shall I virtualize only hosts or hosts and the network? So in our specific case, as we can see here, we've virtualized, well, every red box would be a virtualization environment that would be independent, where we have the devices. Why did we choose this option? Because we had a hardware that had been implemented, that had been previously implemented with some OT regulations, so we have chosen the middle way. We wanted to take advantage of the things that we had for the network, but we could have virtualized the network part with the advantages that this entails, especially in terms of creating software networks or perimeter that has been defined by software, or zero trust. So one of the big challenges or problems of securitization in virtual environments, I will deal with this a little bit later, is the convergence of all these ITs, OTs, etc., and so on and so forth.
And also, later on, may I say something? Yeah, when it comes to virtualizing equipment, the labs that we are using for our demos or our testing, we are using the Cisco one, where we virtualize all the firewalls, all the switches, we virtualize a redundant network, and we don't really need very many physical equipment. We just need a small server, and we have other server to introduce a DMZ, and we have the whole industrial equipment virtualized, and that allows us to test it real time, to manage the switches, to manage the firewalls. All that has been introduced. It's already in that virtual system. And well, it is being very successful nowadays. I forgot to mention that each of these boxes stands for its own hardware environment where virtualization takes place. It wouldn't really make sense to virtualize this area and this other area within the same hardware. You could do it, but you would need to ensure that internal segmentation is the right one. As I said before, we would have to move on to virtualizing the whole network. Where does this take us to, or what is the main challenge that we will be facing in the future? This architecture that we've seen before, including 5 layers, we are seeing more and more a new layer coming in, which is the cloud. And now with the convergence of IoT, OT, and something we kind of suspect to come soon, that is to say a digital twin, getting data from an actual production system to put them up to a system. When you create a digital virtual copy of the reality of real life, it is not a snapshot, but it is just a system that it is kind of a movie twin of what is happening in real life. We're cooking data to extracting data to optimize what happens at the industrial network, or to perform testing or producing new designs. This is what we are seeing right now. One of the main problems that we're having is about uploading such a big amount of data from this area, how to upload them to the cloud. They will be uploaded to the cloud, not to the local system, because these specialized companies will pose us new challenges. That is to say, access to more or less critical data, in many cases highly critical data. Data are to be protected here. You need to protect and secure and audit connections here. For instance, people coming from all over the world, we have to deploy remote access solutions. And on top of that, we are seeing that in some cases, the business is not only happy with the digital twin in the cloud, but we are already seeing cases where data being cooked through deep learning, machine learning, in some cases deep learning, like deep dumbing, so to speak. It's like very stupid joke of mine. I'm saying that because sometimes the results are tremendously poor. And then, based on optimum negotiation parameter, business wants to take it from there and to operate in this area without having any human intervention in between, with all the implications derived from it. Well, if you don't do things rightly in that network, some people may die. Well, there is a recent case in Tarragona where we had people who died, and then another person who was 1.5 kilometers away at home watching TV. And what it is even more worrisome is that, well, even if this architecture is not followed fully, because it's really disturbing, information will be uploaded to the cloud through a channel that goes back and forth to the cloud. So that brings about lots of security challenges, because we have this convergent IT, OT, IIoT. Capgemini has understood that what is needed here is convergence, and then T should be replaced by an H from human. That is to say, we need to have teams of people who are well aware of the security in the cloud, security in field, and security in the equipment. Otherwise, we will not be able to give the right solution to this equipment. Otherwise, we would be creating a very odd Frankenstein. And at the end of the day, this is myself, I'm the man of Graphos, and this is one of the things that we've been analyzing recently. Each of these lines stand for the path that one of the APT groups follow according to the Mitre attack matrix. Each of these red balls stand for each of the phases of the Mitre matrix, and where different techniques are being used. And these are the different paths that the different APT groups follow. I don't know whether you've noticed the small detail, that being that some groups jump from this ball to this other one, and other groups jump off from this ball to this other one. Yet we see that no group jumps over this group at all. This is the point where the groups ensure that the network status is hidden. These are the initial attack phases, and then from this on, that's where we have the expansion or the spread of the attack, as well as the damage inflicted. So the objective of security is not about avoiding, but protecting. An attacker that goes into our network and walks through these phases along our networks has not created any damage. Therefore, it is not especially critical. Yet what we want to avoid is for the attacker to reach this area. In this area, it would be much more difficult for us to detect the attacker, and the attacker will have a green light to carry out damage. In study that we will be carrying out very soon, we will prove that the Mitre matrix is not very different from this one. There are some small differences, but basically same tactics are being used. And not only that, from all these groups we have discovered which are the most widely used tactics on each of the phases. Our final recommendation is the following. If you really want to start detecting attacks on your network, whether it is physical or virtual, or attacks on your equipment, you should start off by detecting evading and defense techniques, and then you take it from there and you go backwards. Because if you are to detect them right now here, perhaps it is too late. Now phishing. What is the entry vector or attack vector most widely used in this area, in this initial access area? That is phishing. And if not phishing, it would be any other type of action where the user will be requested to do something. Therefore, we need to pay special attention to the user. But as I say, phishing will be the main entry vector according to what we've seen on the Mitre matrix. I also would like to mention that to skip off this step of defense and evasion, the only way to go into an industrial network and to attack it from the inside is through breaking physical security. If we do that, we can access to wireless, or we can also perform tampering on equipment, to tamper it, change it. That would be the only way for us to get in. Unless government or a special team or is extremely interested in your industry, the most usual thing for him to get is an attack through the internet or through your network. When the attack is performed inside, could be an in-company person or someone who just skipped the physical security, but physical security is essential, crucial, should not be bypassed. And now, in terms of security advanced solutions, we'd like to share the following with you. This is proposed from Honeywell, but these are Honeywells proposed both in physical, to be installed in physical machines as well as in virtual machines. So in terms of whitelisting and antivirus, what are the differences here? If you send out an Excel to the industrial site that has been scanned by the antivirus, then reaches your server, the antivirus says everything is all right, nothing has been detected, but then there is a macro that did not have the antivirus signature, and the macro may infect. If we don't have any whitelisting, or rather, if we have whitelisting, we can see how our network works, which are the ports that are open, which is the usual communication. And then said, well, my server will contact these PLCs, these other servers. All that has to be identified. So therefore, if virus or malware and attack is performed, that can stay there, cannot jump off to other machines. So in the long term, when we monitor the network, we will be able to see, to detect the malware. So whitelisting allows us to perform a number of extra activities or actions that antivirus does not. So in terms of security, we are seeing significant benefit there. So what it is good or beneficial? Well, antivirus cannot be updated, whereas whitelisting allows us to make changes without actually interfering with the server. So for instance, we make close down a port with no problem, unless the port is making a critical communication between PLCs or other servers. The port can be closed down and eliminate vulnerability. Whitelisting can be upgraded, whereas antivirus cannot be updated. Now, static environment. Often in industrial environments, well, the static environment is not often changed because it is does not change a lot, and well, now it is more changed than before because the IoT at the end of the day is coupling router with number of equipment that actually do not result in significant changes to your architecture. Now, change control. We want to perform comprehensive change control to update whitelisting. If we know that a machine is communicating with other machines, we don't know who made the change, we don't know what happens with the change and the impact of that. We need to have all that information before we update our whitelisting. Because at the end of the day, we want this whitelisting just to allow a specific number of communication or specific some type of communication and not other. Then we also have hardening. Would you like to mention anything about that? Well, this scoring that we see on the screen is based on the left column. This is based on the compliance with CIS. If you leave the OS system as it comes out, or this is what you will be getting. But if you use the Honeywell tool, it will be easier for you to apply CIS patterns. You know that using CIS patterns or forms, it's quite complicated to do. When we have an old server, a new server, we upgrade it, we patch it, we introduce AV according to CIS, security level stands at 25%, 24%, 25%. What happens? There are many ports that are open, many communications that are open. Windows works in a manner that all the applications that you will be installing will work. Hardening will allow us to close down all the communications that are not necessary. Hardening always would allow us to make a performance study about domain controllers, and it would allow us to update the network as well as the server. What is the contribution to virtualization? In virtualization, we will have very many machines connected to each other, but hardening will give us that extra security that we wouldn't have otherwise if we wouldn't do it. If we use virtual environments, we could create a frame for different systems, for different environments, depending on what we want to close or to leave open. So therefore, if we want to deploy more machines, we would apply more framing. So after using Honeywell tool, we will be reaching values around 80%, 90% in most of the system. If we apply CIS 100% and we close everything, our machine will stop operating. Therefore, need to perform a previous study to see who are the users using the equipment, and so that we leave a part open because we just want to leave a small part under operation. Small part of the equipment under operation. Nowadays, the most powerful security element is the Forge platform. Forge platform was used to control industrial systems from Honeywell, but now we have a kit to be installed and we will have product offering. So within the architecture, we see the IT layer, then we have VPN, IPsec. We will be having or getting different updates for patching for AV. That will go to a DMZ, where we have this jump and security team that would allow us to communicate with the serving node in the industrial area. So you may see on the screen that on site A, the serving node is connected to the relay node of the site A. What happens? In a company, we may have a facility in one area and other facilities at a distance. So if they are independent from each other, we need to install independent equipment rather than having a common server. when in a facility we have different SCADAs, whether it is Honeywell, Siemens, you name it, we may implement a relay node and can be connected to the serving node of our choice. This allows any user from any company to log in securely to the final end SCADA, update it, introducing patches, any type of information in a secure manner. There are two types of subscriptions. One is the basic one, where we are talking about remote connectivity, secure file transfer, and if we want to update a premium system, we would be allowed to monitor assets, careful, only Honeywell assets. If we have industrial systems from other companies, we have to ask for permission to see whether we can continue making active traffic injection, because response times can be modified. Therefore, we need to ensure that we have good enough bandwidth. Other than that, we will be having patching, antivirus, also alert monitoring system. These may connect with external sec and trigger alarms, like if it were passive monitoring from any other manufacturer. And what's most interesting of all is that we have a risk management system. This is a system that updates real-time all the data that goes through the network, the systems, the user, captures data from backup if the backup has been performed, and then it produces monthly reports about security in your area. What are the benefits of that? Well, perhaps it is not that interesting for industrial systems because you are well aware of your facility, but perhaps the corporate area, a manager is interested in knowing why that industrial system is producing, manufacturing less, or whether there are any risks involved. And then we have our star product, which is Secure Media Exchange. This is a tablet to secure USBs. In many industries, hardening has been done. No USB, no mobile phone, no nothing can be connected to our equipment. But this system allows us to install a driver on all the servers of our choice. This driver would allow us to log in or to plug in a certified USB, so that before you install something on that equipment, it should go through our tablet. The tablet logs in through 4G through a smart system to the cloud. The name of the system is Atrix, and through deep learning, artificial intelligence, latest AV signatures, tells us whether that USB is safe or not. If certified as safe or secure, recently we've been winning every single cybersecurity award in the world, and we have no competitors there. What is the good thing about this? Well, the risk for USB to be infected is 0.002, minor risk. USB is certified as secure or not. That USB can be connected to our server. If certified, if okay, the server, even if hardened, fully secured, will read it. And this USB is encrypted and fully blocked, therefore cannot be tampered at all. It is a tool that is selling quite well, and I'm sure that can offer very good solutions, especially in those environments where you cannot really have any automatic upgrading. So that's us. That's what you can contact us, and we will be happy to take any questions in the meantime. I have a quick comment. You said that OT networks cannot be you cannot really contact. You can do that through old modems. You can, yeah. I've seen that live myself. No, well, what you said is not fully right. Well, inventory is essential. Having updated inventory, knowing what it is connected to the network. If that is in the inventory and secure, in principle, there should not be a problem. But the problem is oftentimes is that the basic security is not in place. Actually, what you said about the physical security, you cannot really control all the field equipment that may be distributed around. As you said, well, you may get in through there. But I said that the surface attack is much larger when you do it from a desktop somewhere versus having an attacker going to specifically to the place and taking the pain of doing it. Those who do it, people who do it, are highly, highly, highly interested in your company. Yes, unless it is a crazy person from that location. Oh no, I stopped that comment. Right, any questions? Last chance? Last call? All right, no questions. Now we break for coffee. Be back on time, please.